What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. I'm the homie Joshua, also known as Rascal. And today we're going to talk about addiction and this idea of, is it a choice or is it a disease, right? And which are two different models. A lot of it's more political than it is medical or scientific, but we'll get into it a little bit, right? And I'm building up a curriculum around addiction, but I got to get through anger management first, and then that will come. So if you're interested and you're new to the channel, hit the little notification bell so that you can see when content like this comes back. Nonetheless, is it a choice? Is it a disease? First, let's clarify what we're talking about when we talk about addiction, right? And according to the DSM-5, which is a catalog that outlines all sorts of illnesses, physical, mental, psychological, whatever, and different drugs and what they do and yada, yada, yada. But so they say that there are 11 criteria, so to speak, to qualify for substance use disorder. That is, you're taking more than you're supposed to, or you're taking it for longer than you're supposed to. So like pain meds, right? The doctor says take one every 4 hours, but you take two. Or they say, hey, take these for a week and you'll be fine. And 3 months later, you're still running around hustling for pills, right? You want to cut down or want to stop, and you really can't. The struggle is real. Spending a lot of time getting drugs, using drugs, recovering from getting loaded, right? Like that all of a sudden is a priority. Cravings, right? Having cravings, not managing your responsibilities well, right? On account of drugs, right? So not showing up like you should for your family or work or whatnot, when you're using, it's hurting relationships and you still use. That can be a sign, right? Sacrificing your social life, sacrificing work duties, recreational fun, the stuff you do for fun. All of that stuff kind of starts to go out the window because you're preoccupied with getting loaded, right? Using despite it putting you in danger. And so some people will engage in some pretty dangerous things in order to be able to get what it is that they're looking for, right? Or to be able to have a place to go use. And so that can be a sign of addiction. Having physical or psychological issues that are connected to your substance use, or maybe are a result of that, but nonetheless, they're made worse by your using, and you know that, and yet you still continue to do it, right? Increased tolerance, and then withdrawal symptoms that are relieved by using more, and otherwise you're kind of stuck with it. So having one or two of these does not qualify you as an addict, right? They say 2 or 3 of those things has you at like minimal, substance use disorder. 5 or 6, and now you're getting somewhere, right? And more than that, and pretty sure, walks like a duck, talks like a duck, right? But so, what are some of the points that people who say it's not a disease that they look to? They'll say, well, I used, and I just decided to stop, and so therefore, you're using, you just need to decide to stop. We have a problem with this country of putting too much credit on individual experiences, as if that is the norm for everybody. And that's just an unhealthy way of thinking. Again, it fits along with politics, but it doesn't really fit in real life, So when you say, oh, well, I saw this, or I know somebody that went through this, and therefore I understand everything about it, right? Or this is how they got better, so you just need to do that and that'll work for you. But that's not reality. People are more complicated than that. But that tends to be a big sticking point, right? Is my experiences say that you're full of it. Okay, well, your experiences are limited, Do most people that use substances become addicts? No, they don't. Do many people who use as youngsters wind up stopping using? by roughly age 30? Yeah, most people do, right? That stuff is true. Do a lot of people recover without having to go through a program or AA or get medically assisted detox or whatever? Sure, tons of people, right? And hats off to them. So all that stuff is true. That doesn't mean that there is no disease of addiction. It means that not everybody has the disease of addiction. It means that not everybody who uses a substance winds up down that road. It's actually a small percentage, but that small percentage is still a huge number of people, and it has consequences beyond just those individuals using, right? It has consequences for their families, employment, the economy, right? All sorts of things, right? Incarceration. So what are my thoughts? For one, I'm recovering alcoholic. I haven't had a drink since July, and I'm happy about that. Will I ever drink again? I don't know. I haven't since July, and I'm pretty happy. So, as they say, kind of one day at a time. Am I a huge fan of the idea of, which is popular within AA and NA especially, of, well, once an addict, always an addict, and you need to identify as an addict, right? No, if that helps you to stay clean, then that's great. But I don't think it's always healthy, right? And that's one of the things around addiction and recovery that I think we would all be well served to remember. This is not a one size fits all journey. This is not a, hey man, check these boxes on this paper and then here's the result. It's not that, it's not that routine. It really is based on the individual. And if you find something that works for you, then by all means, have at it, right? Whatever route, some people take a theological or religious route. Other people don't. Some people swear by residential treatment programs. Other people hate them. Some people think you need a sponsor and you have to work all the steps. Other people could really care less about AA and NA. There's a lot of ways to go about it. Some people support medically assisted detox, right? Which is only really necessary for some alcohol use and some opiate use, because those are the two substances that you can lose your life from by quitting cold turkey. Not everybody does, right? Again, this is not a broad stroke subject, right? Where we can just put everybody into a box. So people, of course, choose to get high, right? The first time you get high is a choice. I'm not aware of anybody, and I have addicts running back in my family for generations and generations, right? As far back as I can trace. I'm not aware of anybody that wakes up and says, I'm gonna go shoot dope today and get strung out, right? Or anybody who says, yeah, man, I'm in middle school and I'm smoking this blunt, and yeah, I think 10 years from now, I'm still going to be within the same 5-block radius, smoking more and more trees and really not be motivated to do much else. No, of course not. And so the idea of, well, you choose to use a drug, therefore you choose to embrace all the consequences of that. It's just not true. It's just not, that's not how people work. It's not reasonable. And so it's, similar with gangs, right? Hey man, you choose to pick up a bandana and you choose to, sport certain colors or dress a certain way or identify a certain way. Therefore, you as a child are accepting and embracing everything that comes with that lifestyle. No, you don't have a way to know everything that comes with a lifestyle. Even if you know, oh, people get caught up, people go to jail, people get killed, it's dangerous. As a child, you don't view the world that way, right? And you don't really have the intellectual capacity to really comprehend what your life could look like doing this. And so similar with drugs, right? I think the disease model is helpful. It's helpful because shaming somebody is oftentimes not enough. Does it work? Sometimes, yes. And that's often the case with those who choose to stop using by the time they're, 26, 30 years old. A lot of times that just has to do with shame, right? They're embarrassed. The teenage antics ain't cool no more at 25, right? Or you got kids now, or you got a partner that ain't with that, or you taking up skydiving, and skydiving's super fun, but you can't, skydive when you're drunk. So you got to give one or the other, whatever it may be. And there's a lot of people for that, and that's great. But there's some of us that are more susceptible to addiction than others. And again, there's not a very simple, check this box, check that box. There's folks that have parents and grandparents and whatnot that were addicts that grow up and maybe they use a little bit and they stop on their own, and really being an addict is not an obstacle in their life, right? They don't go down that path. That's cool. That does not mean everybody in that situation has that experience. There's people that grow up in phenomenal households with healthy and involved parents that they wind up using and becoming addicts. And there's those that grow up in households like that, obviously, that don't, right? And so it really varies person to person. There are some factors that we know can make you more likely, which includes family usage. There's no addiction gene, that's been figured out. It's not that simple. There's a nature versus nurture, right? In terms of how are you wired based on your DNA from your bloodline. And then also, how does the environment around you impact your mentality, your beliefs, your norms, right? And your responses to things. And that's such a blurry line that it's really hard to nail down one side or the other. And I don't think it's necessary, personally. I think that's a waste of energy. But having addicts in your family can make you prone to addiction. Having mental health challenges, right, can make you prone to addiction. And we'll get into why in a second. The community that you're in, the environment that you grow up in, can make you prone to addiction. And so maybe you grow up in an area where there's a very open, they call them open air drug markets sometimes, right? But, in the city, there were certain neighborhoods with certain streets, man, and in the late 80s, early 90s, especially late 80s, it was like what you would see on TV for those that aren't from a big urban area, right? Of just folks out there hustling to get to the car and get their money. And so you can grow up in an environment like that, and your parents maybe are deeply religious or whatever, and they don't use drugs, and they do their best to keep you away from that. But you grow up in that environment and you grow up in that culture, so to speak, then you could wind up being more predisposed. Predisposed does not mean guaranteed. Predisposed just means, yeah, you're a little bit more likely because of these things than you would be without these things. That's all. And so those play a role. But let's get the choice and disease thing, right? Where does it turn from a choice to a disease, and how? Everybody has their own individual journey, so that's not the road I'm going. But when you take a substance, it especially with the kind of more common, recreational drugs, right? The dopamine floods your brain, right? And that's your pleasure sensor, right? Like, that's your reward. Man, this is good. We like this, right? And everybody does things to to create dopamine, to get that rush. Some people exercise. Some people, challenge themselves in some way, right? A hobby or whatever. Some people, when they get praised, a lot of people, then there's some dopamine that gets kicked in because of that, right? And we like that. So then we're going to behave in a way that might bring us more praise because we like that feeling, you know. So dopamine is a very normal, natural hormone. The problem is drugs can cause a dopamine production that far exceeds anything that you could ever produce naturally, right? That's that rush. That's that, oh man. Now, some people can get loaded and they can feel that rush, um, and never really have the need to go back for more, right? Um, Others, you know, that rush, especially like if there's low self-esteem, if you don't necessarily know where you fit in life, you know, if you have mental health issues, if you don't have a lot of positive pro-social things going on in your life, right? That rush of dopamine can very much become addictive, and not just addictive in some abstract, distant way. Like your body comes to rely on it, and so what your body does is it stops. First of all, there's so much dopamine. It's like, well, man, that's a rush, you know, and so your body's trying to process it all and funnel it all through, right? But then your body also says, you know what, we don't need to make so much dopamine because clearly we're getting a lot. So we should slow down on making dopamine because this is too much. We can't handle this, right? So now let's say used to go for a run every morning, and you go for that run and you get a little high from it, right? You get a little rush. You're tired, you know, your body's sore, but you feel good about that, you know. That's dopamine that's doing that. And so, and if you don't run, you feel off, right? It's you don't feel right. You know, it's a part of your routine, and because now you're not getting that dopamine rush, right? Because you're not running, and that's what you get it from. Now you can get dopamine from other stuff through the day. I don't mean it's like a one event thing, but you know, track with me here. So now your body says, man, we're gonna pull back. So that run, you actually don't get much of a rush from it anymore. And but using all the time, right? And so it becomes an addiction, and your brain starts rewiring itself, and your body starts making just physical scientific adjustments that center around this pleasure seeker, right? That centers around getting this feeling. And those who have been around addicts, right, or maybe are struggling with addiction, you know, now, you know that there comes a time, like, you know, I've had a lot of relatives that use heroin, right? And they would say, man, I just need something, you know, to get me not sick, just to get me well. And they be going through it, they be struggling, and they get that fix, and it's all better. But you know, it's an expression chasing a dragon, right? You never get that same first high. It now you're just struggling to stay alive, right? And to stay well, quote unquote, because your body has adjusted in such a way and changed in such a way based on your substance use that really is the only way you can feel okay. And just sitting down and being like, you know what? No, I'm going to decide not to do this is oftentimes not enough. It's just not enough. And for some people it is, you know, some people get loaded, they go to jail, they dry out, and then they're good. Other people, you know, go to jail, they have an addiction on the streets, they go to jail, they don't really indulge, and they're in prison for years and years, and they come back out and they get right back strung out again, right? Because it's more than just the substance. And that's the thing, is that rewiring of addiction, that's the part that sits with you. That's why some people will say, well, there's no cure, right? Because those cravings, those triggers and whatnot, to some degree, can be there forever. And they can be dormant for a long time and all of a sudden just pop up, right? You know, something gets hit up there, and that folder, right? That addict folder comes back out and gets opened up, and your mind starts going places. So what does all this mean? Personally, I think this emphasis on it's a choice, it's a choice, it's a choice makes people much less empathetic, and it makes it much more difficult, and it increases the stigma that is a barrier to people getting treatment, right? That is a barrier to people acknowledging that they need some help, because that stigma of being an addict is an ugly one, and people don't want that. But also as a society, then, we're not pushing for treatment as much as we are punishment, right? It's, well, this person is using, and then the government just hands out stuff to them, gives them a place to go get high, gives them food stamps and J. So of course they're strung out because the government's paying for them in these liberal states and this and that. Okay, but in the South, which is not a hotbed of liberal states, addiction rates are radically higher, right? And so, if not the same in some places, upwards to much higher than other places. So that clearly is not the case, right? That doesn't fix it. And again, we go on our own little stories, right? And project then weakness on other people. Oh man, you're weak. Oh, you can't do it. Oh, there's nothing wrong with you. Oh, well, if you don't like getting in trouble, then stop using drugs, right? If you don't like being homeless, just go get a job. And if only life was that simple. And I'm not saying that somebody can get clean without making a very serious commitment to do so, right? And somebody can be offered every opportunity in the world and still choose drugs over that. And other people don't really need to get offered anything, and they've just had enough. There's a saying, right? When the pain outweighs the pleasure, then you're willing to do whatever it takes. That's the space you need to be in to really achieve recovery, right? To really get clean and sober. And it's not just to clean out the drugs, man. It's a whole mental and emotional process, and relearning things and unlearning some toxic things, and having a community. The one thing that we do know is having a supportive community is key to anybody getting off of drugs, right? It may be a professional community, it may not. It may be a religious community, it may not. It may be family, it may be friends, it may be strangers, but we need a supportive community. And that's just in life. And so anyways, these are just, I don't want to make this too long, man, but these are some brief thoughts on is addiction a choice, or is addiction a disease? Again, where I come down on it is there are some choices involved, but then also for some people, it goes beyond their capacities to just make a choice. They need more than that. It's not that simple. And it's not because they lack self-will. It's not because they lack self-control. It's not because of any of that. It's because they are addicted, because their brain and their body has changed in such a way that to merely wipe your hands of it and walk away just isn't an option. And they need help. All that to say, and I'll end on this note, it's never, some days it's too late, right? Some days it's gonna be too late for all of us, but it's never too early. And nobody's addiction is such that they can't come back from it, and I have family, man, that are walking miracles. And I have loved ones that I keep opening my door to, and they'd rather be out there doing what they're doing. And because they don't have the confidence, to do it. And me wanting it for them is not enough, it's not the same as them wanting it for themselves. And so, you just wait. Some people get it right away, some people get it later, some people never get it. But we try to give what we have to everybody and let the chips fall where they may. Help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time, because you're worth it. Drop in on the comments, man, and let me know what you guys think and where you come down on this, and what other aspects of this topic you might want to see explored. You guys have a good one, man.